Did you know that there's such a developing country that the average age is only 17? Get ready to witness misery, backwardness, and starvation, because today you'll find out the poorest countries in the world. Number 10, Malawi. The GDP per capita for this poor country in southern Africa is only $1,591 a year. 85% of the residents live in rural areas, and almost the same percentage relies on agriculture. Thus, the country went through an economic crisis between 2015 and 2016 because of a sudden drought that in turn triggered severe famine. According to pre-pandemic data, 52% of the population was poor, the middle class practically didn't exist, and 25% of them lived in extreme poverty. Also, 9.5% of the population has HIV or AIDS. That is, 1,100,000 seropositive out of only 13 million people. Starvation and disease have caused many grandparents to start taking care of their orphan grandchildren. On the other hand, Malawi is one of the epicenters of discrimination and murder of albino children, since their bodies are seen as magical objects, so they're dismembered and sold as amulets. An arm can cost over $1,100 on the black market. Malawi's life expectancy is only 65 years, and only 62% of adults can read and write. If you don't think this is enough, wait for the next countries. Number 9, Madagascar. This African island, known for being the land of lemurs, isn't exactly a paradise for humans. The GDP per capita in this country averaged only $1,543, and 69% of the residents live on less than $1 a day. 85% of households don't have electricity. Only half of the population has access to piped water, and 90% of households aren't connected to a public sewer. So it's common for them to have bowel movements outdoors. Because of this, the island was the scene of outbreaks such as bubonic plague in 2017 and measles in 2019. Life expectancy is only 67 years, and 1 out of 16 children dies before turning 5. The malnutrition rate was 42% before the pandemic. The situation got worse in 2021, when 1.5 million people in the south of the island faced terrible famine caused by drought. So many people had to feed only on locusts while waiting for humanitarian aid. Number 8, Liberia. This West African country was devastated by a civil war until 2003, and in 2015 by an Ebola outbreak. Liberia's GDP per capita is only $1,467, and its capital, Monrovia, was classified by the UN as the poorest city in the world. Only a third of the residents have access to a proper toilet, and, in the whole country, the figure is even lower. In marginal neighborhoods, the toilets are so precarious they collapse when it's raining, or people just use beaches or spaces between houses to have a bowel movement. 83% of the Liberian population is at the threshold of poverty, meaning they live on less than $1.2 a day. The formal sector rate is only 15%, and 32% of the country suffers from malnutrition. As if this wasn't enough, female genital mutilation, a practice that involves totally or partially removing external genitals, is widespread. Between 58% and 66% of Liberian women have been victims of this abuse, condemned by the United Nations. Number 7, Mozambique. This southern African country's GDP per capita is $1,296. 70% of the residents are below the threshold of poverty. Life expectancy is only 58 years, and only 56% of adults can read and write. Mozambique is one of the most affected countries by HIV. 12% of the population is seropositive, and, since 2015, there have been more than 39,000 deaths caused by AIDS. Sanitary conditions are quite poor. 2/3 of the population don't have access to an appropriate water and drainage supply system. The under 5 mortality rate is high. 147 out of 1,000 children will die before reaching that age. Plus, 45% of these deaths are caused by malnutrition, and almost as much by malaria. Number 6, Niger. It's nestled in the Sahara Desert with a gross domestic product per capita of only $1,287. Indeed, 48% of the country lives below the threshold of poverty. That is, they live on $1 a day or less. The country is the victim of a drought that destroyed crops and killed the cattle. 20% of the residents can't get enough food for the whole year. So many of them eat wild fruits, but some are toxic and cause diarrhea. The health outlook is even more serious. More than 20% of children die before their 5th birthday. Life expectancy is hardly 63 years, and only 30% of the people can read and write. As if that wasn't enough, Nigeria is a receiving country for refugees from Mali and Nigeria that are involved in armed conflicts. Also, it's an important crossing point for migrants who go through the Sahara to reach Europe. Number 5. South Sudan. It was recently independent in 2011. This is the newest country in the world and also one of the poorest. The GDP per capita for it is only $1,234. Misery feels at home here. There's almost no electricity, and those who have a cell phone must charge it in the market. Shoes are a rare commodity, so most people go barefoot. 90% of the population lives on less than $1 a day, and, according to the United Nations, 8 out of 10 million residents need humanitarian aid. Although there are cities, it's normal to live in small villages made up of several cabins. Due to the long and bloody Revolutionary War and also the Civil War that started 2 years later, there are many more women than men. So polygamy became widespread, and now a man can have up to 4 or 5 wives. In terms of health, 13 out of 100 children die before turning 5, and maternal mortality is also high. Under these circumstances, it's not surprising that only 26% of South Sudanese can write and read. Number 4, the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The GDP per capita for this country is $1,141. The cell phone you're watching this video on is likely to have a little bit of soil from this country inside, due to the fact that the Democratic Republic of the Congo is a major exporter of coltan, which is a rock that contains a high concentration of tantalum, the mineral used to produce cell phones. However, the riches only benefit the armed groups, resulting in a total mess. 80% of its population lives in extreme poverty, life expectancy is only 62 years, and wars have left 4 million orphan children. According to UNICEF, 43% of children experience delayed growth. Regarding sanitary matters, the situation is also awful. Less than a quarter of the country has access to drinking water. As if this wasn't enough, this country is the scene of one of the most medieval events that continue to occur up to now, the witch hunt. That's right, in September 2021 alone, 8 women accused of witchcraft were burned alive. Number 3, the Central African Republic. As its name suggests, the Central African Republic is a country located exactly in the middle of Africa, and the GDP per capita for this country is $987 a year. 67% of the residents live in extreme poverty, and about 2.3 million people, that is, more than half of the country, need humanitarian aid. 40% of the country suffers from chronic malnutrition, and there are only 3 doctors for every 100,000 residents. The literacy rate is very low, since people who can read barely reach 37%, and life expectancy is only 53 years. Infrastructure is very scarce, and in its capital, Bangui, there are neighborhoods where drinking water hasn't come out of the faucets for more than 5 years. Number 2, Somalia. Civil war devastated this country, and got it divided into several unrecognized states that run against one another. The GDP per capita here is only $986. 75% of the country is below the poverty line, and 43% of the population lives on less than $1 a day. Agriculture is one of the sectors that support the economy, and it went into crisis in 2017 due to a drought that caused a food crisis, specifically famine, for 6 million people. Only 45% of the country has access to piped water sources, and the rest are exposed to get sick with, for example, cholera from drinking contaminated water. In 2015, 1 out of 7 children died before turning 5, mainly from starvation and untreated diseases due to the lack of medical care. Life expectancy is only 56 years, and, just like in Liberia, Female genital mutilation is also widespread. Indeed, 97% of Somali women experienced this practice in 2005. But thanks to the authorities' involvement, it has been reduced. And now it's time to find out the poorest country of all. Residents are, on average, 17 years old. Number 1, Burundi. It's located in the heart of sub-Saharan Africa. The GDP per capita for this country is only $770. It has no access to the sea, and its economy relies on agriculture, which represents half of the GDP and gives work to 90% of the population. Indeed, almost 1 out of 10 Burundians live in the countryside. As it's also a mountainous country, residents are quite exposed to natural disasters like floods. As I told you before I began, this country is extremely young. The average age is only 17 years old, and about 46% of the population is 14 years old or younger. On the other hand, more than half of the children suffer from chronic malnutrition. Burundi is so poor that foreign aid accounts for 42% of total income, and it was described as one of the least happy countries in the world in 2018. However, political riots in 2015 caused international donors to stop giving. So the national budget was cut by 50%, and this was an absolute catastrophe. Fortunately, once the situation stabilized, the contributions returned. Otherwise, many more people would be going hungry in this country of children. You made it to the end. Don't forget that there are more country videos for you in TrendMax. Subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in another video.